It's just so small.
Where it just jettisoned.
Hey there, this is the Small Stuff Podcast. My name is Kyle Roebuck. This is the intro. Let's start the show. David, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And how are you?
I'm great. So real quick, a little introduction for people. Who are you? What do you do, David?
My name is David Chislett. I am a creativity activator, currently living in the Netherlands.
Currently living in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
So what exactly does a creativity activator do? Because that's not a common term. You don't hear that as a profession very often, at least not around here.
Oh, it's a job title I pretty much just made up.
Yeah.
So a creativity activator is someone who goes out into the world to help people get in touch with their inherent creativity so that they can take charge of their lives. It's empower themselves to do more with their ideas, to problem solve better, and to generally just be able to join the dots and give themselves better options. They can make nicer choices.
Right. So generally creativity is a word that's associated with typically artistic like type things, writing music, drawing, painting, anything like photography, anything like that. But I'm curious, are you defining creativity the same way when you're talking about it there? Because you named a lot of things that aren't necessarily.
In fact,
it's a completely different definition, it sounds like.
Yeah, I see art very much as a certain kind of creative product. It's the end result of the thing called creativity. And so most of the time I see a kind of societal miscategorization where what we're talking about when we're talking about drawing, painting, composing is a very specific skill set, a high level of knowledge in a certain area, and technical or physical or coordination skills which allow you to do that thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's not creative. I mean, that describes football as well. What is creative is the thought process, the ideation, the what if that goes into that process, which then results in new music, groundbreaking writing, different performances. So you've got to have both. You've got to have the process, you've got to have the skill, but on its own, that doesn't give you anything. You still got to have the creative mindset, the inclination to look for new answers to old questions. And that's what creativity really is. But it gets expressed through a skill set. And we quite often just get confused about the difference between those two things.
Yeah, it's a very, honestly, I hadn't thought about it much. It's pretty, it's not like a nuanced thing, but the word creativity derives directly from create, and if you're just writing the same song or painting the same picture that's been painted over and over again, I guess it's not really that creative. Maybe you're adding a little bit to it, but I see what you're saying. Inherently, the ability to paint or draw is not creative. You could just be tracing or copying someone else's work, and unless you're adding something to it, it's not really a creative process.
Correct.
Interesting.
It's pretty much what I'm saying. I mean, if you dive into the topic and do a bit of research, you find quite quickly that there is no agreement as to what the word creativity really means. Mm-hmm. There's still a lot of arguing about what's really going on. So, but people are adamant and very clear on one level is that it's not one category of product, because an entrepreneur is creative. I mean, Elon Musk is creative. Richard Branson is creative.
He is.
And so was Albert Einstein.
Mm-hmm.
He asked these huge what ifs and created a new branch of science effectively. So it's very tied into playfulness, into curiosity, into fantasy and imagination, rather than a particular discipline.
It's a particular ability to let go and see beyond like what everyone else sees.
Dude, absolutely. To get into the creative mindset, the first thing you got to do is release judgment. You got to let go of your opinion of what's right, what's good, what's wrong. Because the moment you hang on to that stuff, you just close the door to other options.
It's not just you either. You got to let go of your opinion of what right and wrong is. You also got to let go of what everyone else's is, because you're worried about that too. I mean, you find that if you. So we just little shameless plug here for anybody who hasn't heard, but we just started another podcast called Tales from the Shadows. And it's just me and my producer. We read scary stories that are either submitted or we're finding them somewhere and we're crediting the writer and whatnot. And the ability to drop, even though it's just me and him in the room, like having the ability to be able to step back and like dissociate for a second and be like, it doesn't matter what Brighton, my PA thinks, or the people who are listening to this think. This isn't going to sound good if I don't drop my worries about it being, is this right? Is this wrong? Is this, am I being judged for what I'm doing here? Because you want to read the stories in a way that, or do anything. You want to perform a song. You want to read a story. You want to act. You want to do it in a way that is uninhibited. And you're inhibiting yourself when you're worried about the judgment of other people.
You are. So my sort of big mantra in life when it comes to creativity is rebel, reject, create. Rebel against what you've been taught, rebel against the rules, the assumptions, but also really rebel against your own opinions, your own judgments. Mm-hmm. And only when you do those two things can you create a space open enough to then find the new answers to really create.
Right. That's something that I wouldn't say I struggle with now, but early on I think I did. See, I don't really, this isn't my, I guess it technically is, but what makes my money for the most part right now is I'm a photographer, videographer. I do a lot of commercial work around town and in a couple places on the coast. And I'm in Greenville, North Carolina, by the way. I don't know if I told you that. But so one of the things that you struggle with when you first start out as a photographer, or I guess any kind of artist, is the tendency, the temptation to emulate far too much. Like emulate people you look up to, their style, the way that they sing, the way they shoot, the way that they edit, the way that, they do the craft that you're also in.
Yeah.
And a lot of these people that you follow, that you idolize, they sell courses that, or people who also look up to these idols, these big people in the industry, they sell courses to teach you how to edit like this person. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of stuff. It's like, I'll teach you how to shoot like this person. I'll teach you how to write like this person, And I'm like, you're not that person though. No. You can take the course all you want. You can pay the $200, $300, $400, whatever it is, and you can take the course and you can become a good, Alan Jackson emulator. If you want to write songs like Alan Jackson, you got it. You wrote songs like Alan Jackson, but guess what? That was 30 years ago. And it's not.
But, there's something else going on there as well. To get to the point where you are able to become the new Alan Jackson,
you have to emulate.
You've got to master all the skills of everything that's gone before you can jump off that.
I agree.
Standing on the shoulders of giants kind of idea.
Right.
So I think, first of all, it's a very natural tendency to do that, and it's part of the growth curve. Unfortunately, of course, what happens next is the other really important thing is that a whole bunch of people never do jump off the shoulders of those giants.
You come to a
and
fork.
The reason, and I'm beginning to realize that that's got a lot to do with shame.
Mm-hmm.
That it's such a visceral reaction that I don't dare because I'm not good enough. Because we all remember that moment at junior school where we caught it in the ear because we couldn't draw, stay in the lines when you were coloring in, or whatever your art or your craft project just wasn't good enough, and you were shamed literally by the teacher because you're just not creative. You should stick to the numbers. You should read the manual, go get a job, because you're just not that kind of person. And I think that kind of old judgments of ourselves about our capacities really, really limits us when it comes to to taking what we've learned and taking those skills and taking them somewhere new.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. Is you do, like, at a certain point as an artist or as anybody doing anything, I suppose, you get to a point where and I'm gonna back up for a second. It does apply to anybody doing anything, but I think it's more important for artists, like people who are in that space, like that creation space. Like if you're copying the way that someone, like, I don't know, if you're running a company and you're like, man, I really like the way that this guy who runs Coke runs Coca-Cola. It's like, I'm going to follow that pattern because I feel like you can get away with a little more there because they're a little more, I don't know. I'm not a CEO, so who knows? But you know what I'm saying? When it comes to something in the creative realm, and I'm using creative as in the artistic realm. How about that? That's better. Yeah. When you're doing something there, it's more important to find your own, like, path, like your own style. Otherwise, you're not going to stand out. Necessarily. Exactly. There's a lot of noise out there.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I think, in the business world, we got a lot of tolerance for lookalikes. We all buy the supermarket cola because it's 50 cents cheaper a bottle. Mm-hmm. We don't care. But when you're buying music or buying a piece of art or you're going to see a new movie, you do care. Right. Because you're like, why am I paying for something that I've already seen or I've already experienced? Mm-hmm. So the focus on differentiation is much bigger. But by the same token, it is so important in business, and that's why so many of the top brand names that we have now, like the top performers, are actually brands that didn't even exist 10 years ago, and the guys who were at the top then have almost disappeared. I mean, remember Nokia?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What happened to them? And BlackBerry and so on. So the churn in business is actually starting to become almost as important as it is in art because of how fast technology is developing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I never even thought of that. What's crazy is now thinking outside the box can fuck you. Like it can really mess you up because we're all used to, I'm just going off of phones specifically. Anytime somebody tries to come out with a phone with a keyboard again, because we're different, we're trying something, new but old. It doesn't seem to work. Like the folding touchscreen phones that are coming out. The big, Samsung's, I think Samsung's got one. There's a few other companies who have these things. And it's like, I mean, that's cool, but I don't mind the size of my iPhone, like just in my pants. You know what I mean? Like, it's fine.
Yeah.
I don't need it to fold.
There's a very interesting thing going on there is that, like, in a lot of the definitions of creativity, they talk about novelty or originality. Mm-hmm. The idea that the new creative product's got to be different and original or in some way, unique. But the problem is that if you do stuff that's too far away from what people already know, they won't adopt it. It's too scary. They just back away. Mm-hmm. But if it's too close to what they already know, they also just like, well, I don't care. I've already got that.
Right.
So there's a sweet spot somewhere in between those extremes where it's particularly in a business or technology space, you got to do something that's new, but you can't do something that's so radically new that everyone's just like, oh man, that's just, I'm scared. I'm not strapping that thing to my face. What do you mean?
Right.
Whatever it might be.
I wonder if that's got anything to do with our adoption of, like, planned obsolescence. You know what I mean? Like, we've gotten so used to this, to like a new iPhone coming out every year that's barely different, but it is different. It's 40% faster, but it's not a complete departure. But if you take and look at what we've got today versus what we had 3 years ago, it's not like totally different, but it's a lot different. It's a big change.
That's a chicken and the egg question, right?
Same thing with cars.
Is iPhone doing that because that's how we behave? Or are we behaving that way because that's what iPhone's doing to us?
Well, I think Apple does that, and every other manufacturer of any electronic product does that for money. Just plain and simple. I don't think it goes much further than that. But what you were talking about, where it scares us if something's too different, And we're like, I mean, I've kind of already got this, so why I spend the money, on this new thing? I wonder if our attitude is like that because we've been over the past probably 10, 15, 20 years, maybe even longer. I don't really know how far back this trend goes. But we're so used to it that when a big change, because you got to think, like way back in the day, like a huge change was, I've got a horse and buggy, and now there's a car. You know what I mean? Like this is completely different. This is entirely different.
And there was a lot of resistance in the beginning to the idea of a
Okay,
car.
so it's not a new concept.
No.
No. So maybe that is why Apple does it, because they know that it scares us.
I think so. I mean, if you look at every major change that's happened. I mean, the switch from television was going to kill the movies, and video recording machines were going to kill TV, and and that's just the story with new technology every time. And when it's been around long enough and it becomes accessible and cheap enough, then we go, oh, okay, cool. And then we get worried about that being killed by the next thing. It's fairly ridiculous when you look at the progression of things we thought were going to kill the stuff we already knew.
Yeah. So how I guess, hold on, let me back up. Whoa. Come on, brain. I was trying to say like 5 different sentences at once just then. So where'd you grow up? How did you grow up?
I grew up in the city of Johannesburg in the northern part of South Africa.
Right. Okay.
I'm the youngest of 5 kids. So I got 2 older brothers and 2 older sisters. I grew up in a house awash with music and books. My mother sang in the choir. My brothers were fanatical about music, and everyone read a lot.
Yeah.
So being the youngest and being quite a lot younger, I kind of grew up pretty unsupervised. Mm-hmm. So I had unfettered access to all of this material. And I guess in a way that always kind of set me apart. I always, felt like an outsider, even within my own family, because the age difference.
Yeah.
But also later, because of what I'd learned from being the youngest in a big family, I was also the outsider within my peer group. And once I identified that feeling, I guess I kind of just carried on floating on out there.
Yeah.
And proceeded to get more and more involved in stuff that was somewhat less, I don't know, mainstream possibly. So, as a white guy growing up in South Africa, in the height of apartheid, I was absolutely clueless as to what any of that meant when I was a kid.
Yeah.
It was only when I got to university where things were starting to relax a bit, and I just had the emotional maturity to look for myself and kind of go, wait a second.
Yeah.
I mean, I can blame how efficient the apartheid state was at controlling the media and stuff, but the bottom line is I wasn't a very critical thinker when I was younger.
Yeah.
And I think, all of those experiences kind of combine into making me the kind of person who always wants to look a little bit harder at any answers and ask a lot more questions to go and see if there's any more loose ends that aren't being accounted for that might give different answers.
Yeah. So growing up in South Africa at that time and moving away and going to university and realizing, taking a closer look at how you grew up and how things were taught to you. So it was when you moved away, you realized, oh, that's fucked up. Is that about when that happened? Or, I mean, were you kind of already, how was it growing up in an extremely racist, time in South Africa?
Well, as a middle-class white guy, I wasn't even aware that I was growing up in a racist environment because I didn't meet anybody except other white people.
Wow.
Because of the Group Areas Act controlled thing to such a degree. And that's why, I mean, I didn't even go away to university. I went to university in my hometown.
Oh, okay.
But suddenly, for the first time, I was in a social space with Black people of my own age.
Uh-huh. Wow.
And then it's like, wow, none of the stories, none of the way things are supposed to be apply. These dudes are just like me, man. They're the same age. They're here for the same reasons. They have the same roles and goals. They want to do cool stuff. And I'm like going, why is this even a surprise to me? That's fucked up.
Yeah.
That's just Wow.
Yeah. And okay, so I didn't grow up in a I grew up in a similar situation, but not near as extreme.
Mm.
Growing up in southern, eastern North Carolina, southeast United States, there's, I mean, I'm a young guy. I was born in '94, so yeah, I'm very young. I don't look it, but actually, I look about my age now. To be honest, I've looked like this since I was like 15, though. So
Okay.
like gray hair and all, like it's been the same since I was like a teenager.
Wow.
Anyway, growing up in the late '90s, early 2000s, the South has always been kind of slow to adopt. Like the Civil War is a great example. They don't like change, and they've always been very slow to adopt more liberal ideals, like more left-leaning ideals. And it still is a bit more racist than the rest of the country. Not that everybody in the South is racist at all, but it's just there's still more here, I would say.
Yeah.
And especially when I was younger, before social media became, this huge thing, and all these movements were becoming more mainstream, more in the spotlight, and everyone knew about them. And going to college, also in my hometown, going to college also gave me a different perspective. I always had, like, being part of a newer generation, growing up on the tail end of that kind of mindset. We were part of a generation that was rejecting that, even as kids. We're not that, I don't want anybody to think that my parents are racist or anything, but everybody I was growing up around came from a different time, and going to the university that I went to with all these different perspectives, people coming from different areas of the country, and being surrounded by people I'd never been surrounded by. Far more minorities, far more people in the LGBTQ community, and that really opens your eyes and makes you think about the world differently. It makes you question things a little more intently, I guess.
Yeah. And from a creativity perspective, diversity is so important.
Yes.
Because if everybody has the same general background, they have access to the same kind of information and the same way of processing that information, it means you're all going to come up with pretty similar answers to every problem that you encounter.
Yes.
So that means that your progress, your development is going to stall at some point because there's just no difference. And so what happens is when you're forced to work together for whatever reason in an environment where someone's gay, where someone's black, someone's really rich, someone's really poor, someone's extraordinarily good looking, even someone's super clever, someone's good with, all of a sudden everyone's got a very different way of seeing the world. And the solutions you come up with when you take that into account are always more effective and more efficient and longer lasting than the ones that just serve much smaller input sets.
Right.
And so it's an inevitability that really closed homogenous societies will end up eating themselves. Basically, they'll cannibalize themselves.
Yeah. Wow. That got deep.
Scary thought, right?
Yeah. So have you always well, let's back up a little bit. Yeah. So going to university, what did you initially go for? You strike me as the kind of person who went for one thing and then changed halfway through.
Oh man, you got me.
Yeah.
I went to go and study law.
I did the same thing, by the way. I changed my major, like, I don't know what you guys call it over there, but I changed my major, my area of study, like 3 times, like, throughout. And that caused me to be there longer than I needed to be, but, whatever. And then I still ended up not using my degree.
I was supposed to become a lawyer. After the first 6 months, I was like, this is not for me.
Yeah, no. You made it further than I would have.
Yeah, very like when you actually find out how the law works and what it really does, all of that sort of idealistic, doing good, righting wrong stuff kind of evaporates in a puff of smoke.
Mm.
And I ended up majoring in English literature and philosophy.
Yeah. Philosophy.
Yeah.
That explains
great for a job.
Yeah.
Absolutely perfect, custom made.
Yeah, great for an entrepreneur. Yeah.
Well, if I look back at my life, it runs like railroad tracks. Everything I'm busy with now is connected in a very straight line with everything that I did in the past.
Yeah.
It's just that at the moment, it felt like utter chaos. I was just like, oh, what am I doing? Where am I going? I'm going to try this. I'm going to try that. I'm going to do this and do that. It's only with the benefit of hindsight. I'm probably 25 years old. I'm probably twice your age, maybe a bit more. It's like railroad tracks, man. It just runs these straight lines, these themes that tie everything I did together, even when I doubted even that basic truth about my decisions. It's an incredibly empowering thing to get to a stage of your life where you can look over your shoulder and see that.
You were a really curious kid, weren't you? I feel like did you ask a lot of questions? Were you annoying about that, like that kind of shit? Like I was. I know I was very much the why kid.
Oh yeah.
But it wasn't like I was being defiant. I was just like, no, I would very much like an explanation, please, coming from a 6-year-old,
Yeah. I'm not so much sure that I was like that as a small kid, although my older brother said to me the other day, he's like, yeah, you always want to know why. And
Right.
Not because you're trying to be difficult, because you're genuinely curious.
Yes.
But I'm a very keen observer. I watch very carefully and I pay a lot of attention to the details. So I pick up a lot of stuff almost without realizing it because I'm really observing.
Yeah. I think it's fair to say, that falls within curiosity.
Yeah.
I think there's a correlation between the level of creativity that someone has and the level of curiosity that they carry with them. I think there is.
If you want to reduce the complexity of what creativity really is to like a one-liner, creativity is joining the dots. So the more dots you have, the more creative you can be. So the more curious you are, the more dots you're going to collect. So the more creative you can be. It's pretty logical on that level.
Yeah. So I'm right.
Yes.
All right. So when were you in university? When were you doing that?
Right up until when you were born.
Sorry. I always feel bad, because look, I have people. Most of the people I have up here are older than me, just because the people that I bring on tend to be a little further along in their respective careers, for the most part, and that's just a pool of answers, for questions I might have. So most of the people I bring on are older than me, and I always feel bad whenever I'm like, I was born in '94, and somebody's like, oh, Jesus Christ, and I was
just graduating from university.
Yeah. So when you left there, what was the move? What did you do at that point?
I was busy doing a post-grad year specializing in literature.
Uh-huh.
And I had a bursary from the university, so they were paying for me to be there. I'd done very well in my exams. They were like, yeah, we want you to stick around. And 6 months in, I dropped out. I got very disillusioned with the whole ivory tower academic world and the whole idea of pursuing a post-grad. There's only one end to that in literature, and that is working at a university. And at the same time as all of this, I'm playing in a punk band and I'm managing artists, and I'm competing at university championships level of athletics, which is sort of just below interstate level. And I'm in this weird, like fairy land of the romantic poets at the same time. And I just went, no, I don't, I quit. Dropped out, deregistered, sold my old third-hand car and my record collection, and bought a one-way ticket to London.
Wow.
So I didn't actually graduate from the post-grad course. I dropped out and I flew to London, where I worked in the post-production studio of a television production company and went to go and watch a lot of live music.
Dude.
Because in South Africa in the 80s, when I was a teenager, there was a cultural boycott. And so even buying records of bands like Black Flag or the Sex Pistols, it was banned. So, you just couldn't get it.
That's crazy.
So I got to London, and like the second wave of all of that stuff was happening. And I finally got to see all of my idols when they were 20 years older than they had been when they became famous. And that's what I did. I just disappeared into the great big city of London, where everyone was way weirder than I could ever have hoped to be. And it was really good for me.
Yeah. So you're just vagabonding around. Like you're just, just living life and doing whatever.
Yep.
Yeah. You sound all over the place. Not much unlike myself. I've also done a lot of things that don't connect, Yeah. Like, a lot of yours does connect, but I'm also a musician. I also was in a band for a very short-lived amount of time, but I was in a band.
Yeah.
And I've been a bus driver. I've been in a band. I've been a visual artist. I do the video and photo business and this, and you're cool, dude. I like you. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you're all over the place.
What I've realized is, people always like going about having a purpose and like the one thing that you're supposed to be doing in your life. And what I've realized is that isn't really true.
No.
So for me, the one thing is creativity. Almost everything I've done has been about creativity.
Yep.
Music, writing, performing. I was an actor at school, all of that kind of stuff. But the other thing has been helping people, because the other stuff that I've done is I've been a promoter. I've been a journalist. I'm a qualified medical orderly. I'm a Reiki channel. I'm a coach. And so you bring all of those things together, and it's like my focus has been about creative expression and helping people, which I've now brought together into one thing, which is using creativity to help people.
Right. So what you do now is coaching, right? Is it considered coaching?
Well, I basically do a lot of keynote speaking.
Okay.
And off the back of the keynote speaking, I offer workshops so that people can really dive deep into the actual skills and the tools that are available to enhance your creativity. And where necessary, I also offer direct one-on-one coaching where people can work with me over an extended period of time to really focus on building the habit set that underpins a creative life. Because you know what? It's seriously unromantic. If you want to be really creative, you've got to have a routine, you've got to have a structure, and you got to pump the work out. Because the more you do, the better you get. The better you get, the more options you see. The more options you see, the more original your work becomes, until you break through the noise, like we were saying earlier, to where you suddenly stand out and people are like going, wow, that's amazing. There's only one way there, and that's through the hard work.
Yeah.
There is no such thing as an overnight success in that regard, because, well, maybe there is, but then you're gone, and it's just luck and chance, and you're finished. If you want to stay there, if you want to make a career there, you got to put in the miles.
Right. That's the scary thing about becoming an overnight success. If you haven't been putting the work in, if you legitimately are an overnight success, it's kind of like, well, no, not really, but it's close to this. I feel like it would be the same feeling. So I know that like a stand-up comedian works on this one set, like this 1 hour set for years, and they just slowly refine it and everything. And then they, until they blow up. They had their first special. They've had years to work on this special, right? This one that they're filming. They come out with that, and now all of a sudden they're back at square one, a place that they haven't been in, 5, 6, 7 years or whatever, however long they've been doing it.
Yeah.
And if you're an overnight success, I imagine it would be like a similar feeling, like, oh shit, I have been doing this and I haven't been successful, and now all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I'm successful. That pressure is on to deliver again. Yeah. Whereas if you've really been working, you've been making good shit and nobody's just seen it. You know, you already know what you're doing. Somebody just happened to see it, and you found your fan base, and all of a sudden, you know,
it's happening.
Yeah, you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
You know how to put out something good again.
So the scenario you're sketching there is so bad because the creative mindset requires certain conditions, and one of them is you mustn't try too hard. The second one is that you've got to be pretty happy, and you've got to be able to look inwards, and you've got to be mentally quiet, so you can't be stressed and anxious.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're under pressure, you're definitely not enjoying mental quiet. You're probably not very happy, and you're definitely trying too hard.
Yeah.
So your chances of coming up with anything under those conditions are negligible.
Mm-hmm.
So, and yeah, as you carried on to say, that's why, you know, so many people who won idols in that sort of middle period of idols were established musicians who've been playing the circuit for 10 years. And they were like, you know, all I need is enough people to see me and understand how good we are so that we can then make a living out of this. Mm-hmm. And that, you know, so that's why a certain category of idols winners now have careers, not because idols made them, but because idols shone a light on what they'd already done. And the guys who literally just came through idols and never really performed or done anything before, who maybe won in the early days, they're all gone.
Oh, are you talking about American Idol now?
Yeah,
I missed that. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Just
I get it. Yeah,
idols, but the TV show.
Yeah, I got you. I forgot that it's American Idol here.
Yeah, in America.
Yeah. I forgot there's multiple branches. How American of me to be like, oh, I forgot about not American versions of that.
Yeah, the rest of the world.
Yeah, the rest of the idols. Oh man.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I like the statement about you can't be trying too hard, because I've 110% been there, and I've been there when I first started this podcast. I was there. I was trying too hard because I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't know that. I mean, a lot of it to begin with was me not being very good at holding a conversation, because I've always been an introverted person, and you know, talking to new people is always weird. You know, until I did this when we first started this, I built up about 10 episodes before I started releasing them, just so I had a nice buffer. Because I didn't know if guests were going to slow down or what. And they did eventually, but that's why I had the buffer. But I learned early on that, like, having questions prepared, for me at least, for this style of podcast, having questions prepared, writing down questions during the podcast to ask, that's just not, it's not how you have a conversation, you know? And that's all I want to do. I just want to have a conversation.
Yeah.
And
so you developed a process which you now trust.
Yeah, well, honestly, the process is what I said when we started this thing, which was like, I asked you a couple questions, and I was like, so we want to cover this. And that was really just reminding me, you know, me and you spoke before this, but I've got so many things running through my head at once, like in any given moment. And I'm like, okay, all right, what's this about again? And so I needed to just refresh real quick. And then I was like, okay, I got it, cool. Reminded, I understand what we're doing, let's go. You know, and that's just kind of, it's not even a process, really. It's just, we just start having a conversation. And
it's creativity in action. You know, as I'm throwing out a dot, you're connecting it to something else, and you say, oh, well, then what about this?
Right.
And then I'm reacting to that. And it's like, it's literally live improv. That's what conversation is.
Yeah.
And it's interesting.
Yeah.
Which is a highly creative process.
Yeah. It's definitely, I think this has made me, one, a better conversationalist. I said this on a recent podcast. And two, better at, like you said, improv, like improvising solutions or improvising ideas or whatever. And yeah, I think a lot of my creativity that I have now comes from this.
Yeah.
Which is
let me ask you
not trying hard. Yeah.
Where are you and what are you doing when you get your best ideas?
Ooh, usually I'm already working. Usually I'm already going. Like, I don't know, man. It just kind of comes to me whenever it wants to. I don't.
Yeah.
I would say usually I'm in like I'm already in a flow. Like I'm already in that state. I'm already working. You know, if you just ask me like pretty like cold open, like, you know, if we got into a meeting and you're like, okay, go, what's your idea for this? I'm going to be like, maybe this. And it's going to take like, give me like 10, 15 minutes to warm up and get into a state of flow with you. And then we can come up with some good shit.
You know, so what's interesting about that is that, I mean, I'm glad you're using the word flow because it is very related to the work of Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi and being in flow and in the moment,
right?
And adapting to the stimulus that's hitting you, using your skills, maybe stretching yourself a little bit, but not too much, so it's intimidating. So, but you've got to be safe, right? You got to be safe. You got to be open. And so, a lot of people report getting their best ideas when they're not actually working, when they're doing things like showering or ironing. And when their conscious mind is no longer busy with the problem they're trying to solve, and they're busy doing something that's fully automated, and their unconscious mind has been churning away with that whole thing without stopping. And then our rational mind is finally quiet enough for the answer to just go, boom. And you're like, oh, I got it.
Right. You'd consider stuff like that a state of flow, right? Like brushing, you're getting ready in the morning. That's a state of flow.
Well, the brain state of flow and the kind of state you get into when you're doing highly automated activity with no rational mind in charge are very similar.
Right. Yeah. I think about, so I also did part of a post-grad degree. I went to grad school for a master's in, I don't even remember what the hell it's called now, but it was basically like leisure studies, kind of recreational leisure kind of thing. It was in the Parks and Recreation department. There were two different like focuses you could have. One was like recreational therapy, which is like occupational therapy and stuff, but it's more like we're going to make you feel better by you learning how to play guitar again because you used to be able to do that. And now you can't because, I don't know, you lost a finger in the war. And so we're going to use recreational therapy to, you know, help you out. My side of it was more the Parks and Rec side of it, but a lot of the classes, you know, wove together. And one of them was literally leisure studies. And in that, you talk about flow and you talk about the state of flow and how it's just kind of when you are thinking, but you're not thinking a whole lot. You know, it's like when you're driving and you've got a long ways to go and you kind of quote unquote wake up in the middle of the drive and you're like, I don't remember anything from the past 30 minutes. And that is a state of flow. It's not the same thing as like a creative state of flow, which I would argue is something very similar to like a video game. Like if you get into a state of flow playing a video game, especially something, have you ever watched anybody play Fortnite? Fortnite is a like a online like battle royale style game where just a shit ton of people are dropped into one game. And one of the things you can do in this, and watching really good players play this is absolutely nuts. You can build and kind of destroy buildings as you need to as a player. You're just a player running around with a gun, but you have all these supplies. You can build a house like really quickly to go in if you need some cover, or you can build stairs to like get you up to somewhere. And watching people do this so quickly, I mean, it's insane. It's like watching a chess match that's sped up by 15. And I think, I don't think people realize, well, first of all, I don't think a lot of people know what flow is. But also, I don't think people realize that they get into a state of flow every day and that, like you're saying, they should, if you've got something that you're trying to figure out, don't think about it when you're supposed to be thinking about it. You know?
Take a break.
Take a break. Think about it when you're making your coffee, when you're making your cereal, making breakfast, like you said, taking a shower or whatever, because your brain's a little more relaxed and you're already on like a creative autopilot. So let it kind of take over.
Yeah, because, you know, like when you're in the shower, it's warm, it's comfortable, you're happy, you know how to shower, it doesn't require any mental effort, and you just like, you're cut loose of all the normal moorings, which allows your brain to go to interesting places, basically. Yeah, which is nice.
Yeah,
you know, the cool thing about flow is that when you've got an extremely well honed skill set, that's when remarkable things start to happen. So what you're saying about the Fortnite players is, I mean, these are people who play a lot. They're highly skilled. They know exactly what to do with the console in order to build the stairs and what have you. And that's what elite athletes do as well. You know, especially in team sports, they are so highly skilled that they, in the moment, with absolutely no conscious, rational processing, are able to process all of that stimulus and know what to do next in order to score the points, you know, beat the opposition. And there's no way they can explain what they did afterwards, because it's not irrational. It's just unrational. It's got nothing to do with rationality. And so the more time you spend honing your skills, the better the outcome of your flow state will be.
Yep. Totally agree.
And and that's, you know, because you're right. I mean, driving the car, I mean, I've done that, you know, massive drives through the semi-desert in South Africa. You see nothing for hours, road hypnosis, but you're not asleep. But it's just that your rational mind is essentially being numbed by the lack of variation.
Right. And you've got the ability. I really think in those kind of places, you've got because I do it all the time. Like, I could be listening to a podcast and be driving down the road, and I'm solving a problem in my head, you know, because I feel like it's you're hijacking that way that your brain works in those states. You can latch on to it, and it makes things, it makes problem solving a lot easier. And I imagine people are probably going to agree with you on that. Like, a lot of problems are solved in the shower, you know, brushing your teeth,
at the water cooler, you know, not at your desk.
So, I am curious, how do you feel? Because, I mean, I may or may not have experience in this, but how do you feel that mind-altering substances fit into states of flow, creativity? I've got my opinions on it, but I want to hear yours. How does that fit in, if it does at all? I guess it depends on the mind altering, but
altered states of consciousness essentially are a stream of dots, right? So you know, it's certainly like the first time you take LSD or what have you, you're going to have a category of experiences that you've never had before. And if the literature is to be believed, you'll never have anything quite like it ever again, no matter how much LSD you take after that. The trouble is that once and so a lot of people report heightened creativity after hallucinogenic experiences, because literally their eyes are open to a category of possibilities they just never conceived of.
Right.
But when behavior like that becomes habituated, it becomes a lot less about the dots and the new experiences, and rather about the repetition or the chase of that first rush.
Right.
And so essentially people are trying too hard.
Like, it can become a crutch.
And then the crutch starts to get in the way, because now without it, you can't do anything. Because of physical or emotional dependency. So it's a real double-edged sword. I think a lot of people who are heavy drug users are also highly creative, because their lifestyle takes them out of the mainstream and gives them access to a train of thought and a range of experiences that are very different. And when they intersect with what the rest of us consider to be normal life, that gives in an interesting combinations. But if you go too far, it's like what we were saying earlier on about technology. If you go too far, everyone's just like, dude, I just don't understand you anymore. That's just too weird.
Right.
And then it doesn't matter how technically creative it is, because no one cares.
I get that. I think stuff like that, you know, using mind-altering substances, consciousness-altering substances to try to unlock some buried creativity is useful in certain cases. But like you're saying, I mean, you can definitely overdo it and just become, you know, out of your mind and just like absolutely useless, you know, and you're just stuck watching TV. But I think it's useful in helping take that unconscious mind that's running throughout the day, that is picking up on stuff that you're not necessarily conscious of. I think it helps bring a lot of that stuff to the forefront And it also lowers, like what we were talking about earlier, it lowers your inhibitions to an extent that you're not worried about what people might think about this. And like you're saying, you can't overdo it, and you can go a little too far with that and be like, I don't really care what people think about this, and and you create something that nobody gets. But
the bottom line is that the effects of that are reproducible without the mind altering drugs. It'll take longer to unlock whatever blocks you have because you are so ashamed or scared or what have you. But given time and effort, it is possible to unlock your creativity without going there.
Right.
And that is a better long-term solution generally, because it's difficult to see how, if this thing that you're taking is what makes you creative, how are you ever going to be creative without it?
Right. And I totally agree with that. I 100% agree with that. If you're not quote unquote a creative person, which I think is bullshit. I think everybody's creative to an extent. And then maybe, maybe try this to unlock something, but it's not going to make you more creative just inherently. You do still have to work at it. But I think for somebody who's already in that artistic kind of realm and maybe just needs a little, I need a little push or whatever, then occasionally using something like that as a tool is useful, because I think it puts you in a state of not necessarily a state of flow, but it kind of opens up that railway for you. Like it the same thing that you get in when you get into flow, like your conscious mind is a little more put to rest and you can think a little easier. I think stuff like THC, or I could not tell you about LSD, but maybe that helps too. It helps unlock things. But yeah, I was curious about your view on that, being that, you've been doing this for how long now? This sort of coaching, teaching, speaking about this.
Wow. If I go back to the origins of the first time I did anything like this, it's 7 or 8 years now.
Okay.
It's been my exclusive focus for the last 3.
And what made you start doing this?
The realization that actually everything I had done up until now kind of came together here.
Okay.
That, I'm never going to be a world famous poet or musician or what have you, because I don't want to be. I've never put in that kind of work.
Right.
What I'm interested in is the process, is the mechanics, and its capacity to empower people to take control of their lives and their choices.
Right.
And that in a long-term way. I'm in my 50s now. Looking into the future, that's something I'm way more interested in than like ending up like Mick Jagger running around playing the same songs over and over and over on stage.
Yeah.
As a rock star.
Yeah. I had a thought, but I don't remember what it was. It went away. Crap. Yeah.
Couldn't have been that important.
Oh no, I got it. So you're more interested in fostering the next famous rock star, world famous poet or whatever than you are necessarily being the next. You're interested in helping people maybe achieve that goal instead of doing it yourself.
With artists, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But more importantly, what I'm interested in is helping average human beings look at the insane situation that we're in currently with the planet, with the climate, with the rise of populist politics, with the threat of the digital divide and the wealth divide just growing bigger and bigger and bigger over time, and helping people to understand that actually one by one, as ordinary private citizens, we actually do have the power to make different decisions and to therefore create different futures. We are so disempowered because of the way we're brought up and the way we're educated. And I firmly believe that we are encouraged to believe we're not creative, because if we were encouraged to be creative, we would not be controllable in any way whatsoever. And capitalism depends on control. You have to have a controlled supply so you can profit from it. which means you got to manipulate demand. And if people are thinking for themselves and creating their own options and doing their own thing, that's very hard to do.
Yeah.
So if we want to have a different future from the one that is rapidly descending on us, we all need to start thinking clearly for ourselves and just rebelling and rejecting what we've been told and creating different futures.
Wow. Yeah, I never thought about how stifled creativity is, because I'm so wrapped up in it. You know, it's all I do, that it's hard to see outside of it and see. You know, I mean, I think as controlling as I believe the American government and most other governments are, I still know that for the most part, you can kind of do whatever you want. You just have to. I think maybe I'm rebelling. Maybe that's what it is. But I had someone. This is going to be the third podcast in a row, I think, that I've said this. But I had someone give me a piece of advice a few years ago that really helped open up my brain, open up my mind to the possibilities of anything, really. A friend of mine who is into a lot of stuff and has been, you know, he's just kind of not a serial entrepreneur, but kind of. He told me, I was asking him, like, how do you go about doing all this stuff? I have no clue how to even start something like that. And he was like, look, the moment you realize you can do whatever the fuck you want to do, you know, you're free. Like you can do whatever you want to do, you know.
Just start.
Yeah, just start doing it.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of falls in line with what you were saying, you know, do what you want to do. You know, whether that means starting a passion project up and doing that for creativity's sake, or starting a new business, or changing the way, even something as simple as just changing the way you think about something. You know, you don't want to think this way. You don't like the way that this particular, you know, mindset that you might have takes hold of your life or whatever, then change it, you know?
Yeah.
And I'd say that falls in line with creativity too, because you have to be creative to find a new way to think.
Yeah. It falls very well within the definition of creativity. And that's the thing that I'm interested in, that empowerment, that realization that, oh, actually I can change stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to wait. I don't need permission. I don't need to be a genius. I don't need extra skills. I don't even need money. I don't even need access to anything. I can just change the way I think,
right,
which will change the way I behave. And when I change the way I behave, I will get different results. And the different results will, again, change the way I think. And you kickstart a cascade of change,
mm-hmm.
which can take you anywhere.
Yeah.
If you grow up in poverty with access to literally nothing, that cascade will take you longer to get out of there and anywhere more interesting or attractive or safe,
mm-hmm.
but it will happen.
Yeah.
As long as you stick with the program and you keep on keeping on.
Yeah.
You got to keep on turning up. You can't think, okay, 5 years, that's enough. Okay, I'm stopping now. It doesn't stop.
No.
Nothing else in the world stops. Anything that stops dies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think you said something earlier about, you just mentioned it again, but you got to continue to show up and you got to continue to put one foot in front of the other when you're trying to change anything like that. That's part of being creative, is just continuing to move, like you were saying.
Yeah.
And I think that might be what scares people so much about change. You know, it's definitely what scares people about change. It's a question, you know. If you're in a safe place, if you're in a safe job, you know, you don't have to go anywhere, but you're not happy. It's scary to leave, because you don't know, and there's a huge mountain in front of you, and it's hard to see that it's just one foot in front of the other, and you'll get there eventually.
Yep.
You know. Well, dude, this has been a great conversation.
Yeah, that 30-minute conversation somehow turned into almost an hour.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, did I not tell you these? I do at least an hour. Yeah, so we're good. Yeah, it's usually an hour and a half or so. But
Right.
I feel good, dude. This was good. I want to have you on again if you're willing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I enjoyed the chat as well, man. It's nice. You got a similar but different perspective, which results in different conversation junctions.
Yeah. Yeah, this
Yeah.
was enjoyable. So David, where can people find you?
DavidChislett.com is the easiest place to start. That's my website. From there, you'll find links to my books, to my videos, to articles I write. Be able to sign up to my newsletter. You'll find links to my YouTube channel, my LinkedIn, all that stuff, all under one roof. David Chislett, 2 T's at the end.com.
Okay, we'll make sure all that's in the show description. David, thank you again for joining me. This has been great. Everybody,
been a pleasure.
Same here. Everybody, thank you for sticking with us for a little over an hour or about an hour. And make sure you follow Small Stuff Podcast on Instagram. Make sure you follow Small Stuff Media on Instagram. We've got a few things coming out soon that we're working on. You may have heard the promos, but we've got 2 podcasts coming out very soon. One this Friday. Well, actually, it's probably already out when this episode comes out. Tales from the Shadows. Check out Tales from the Shadows and check out About That with Obi Smith. They should both be out by now. I think that's it. See you later.